Michael Hartwell had built an empire from nothing. At 62, his construction company employed hundreds, and his name appeared on buildings across 3 states. But success had come with a price that no amount of money could repay: his father. Edward, now 78, sat in the leather chair of Michael's office most afternoons. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he held his coffee cup, a reminder of the stroke that had slowed him down 2 years ago. Edward had been a factory worker his whole life, proud and sturdy as oak, never asking for anything. Now he needed help with simple tasks, and the shame of it sat heavy in his chest. Sarah, Michael's wife of 35 years, was 48, and still had that gentle way about her that had first caught his attention in their college years. She wore a blue dress that day, professional yet soft, as she sat beside Edward on the office sofa. She had been spending more time with the old man lately, and Michael had noticed but said nothing. The truth was, Michael had been avoiding his father. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield of guilt. He had been too busy building his company to visit much over the years. Too many missed birthdays, holidays spent reviewing contracts instead of sharing meals. Now that Edward needed him most, Michael found himself making excuses, burying himself in work while Sarah filled the gap he had left that Tuesday afternoon. Michael returned early from a job site inspection. He pushed open his office door and froze. Sarah sat close to Edward, her hand resting on his weathered forearm. She was speaking in low, soothing tones, but it was not the words that stopped Michael in his tracks. It was what lay between them on the coffee table. Dozens of old photographs spread across the polished wood. Pictures of Michael as a boy, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on Edward's shoulders. Michael in his high school football uniform, Edward beaming with pride in the stands. Michael's college graduation, Edward in his only suit, eyes wet with joy. Sarah was pointing to each photo, and Edward was smiling, really smiling, in a way Michael had not seen since before the stroke. His father's voice, thick with emotion, drifted across the room. That was the day he scored the winning touchdown. I was so proud I could not speak. Just sat there in the stands with tears running down my face like a fool. Sarah laughed gently. You were never a fool, Edward. You were a father who loved his son. Michael stood frozen in the doorway, his briefcase heavy in his hand. Sarah glanced up and saw him, her expression unreadable. Michael, come sit with us. But he could not move. His throat had closed up, and his eyes burned. Sarah had been collecting these photos for weeks, he realized. She had been sitting with Edward, listening to stories Michael had been too busy, too guilty, too afraid to hear. I'm sorry, Michael finally managed, his voice breaking. Dad, I'm so sorry. Edward looked up at his son, an understanding passed between them, decades of unspoken words compressed into a single moment. The old man's hand shook as he reached toward an empty spot on the sofa. Come here, son. Let me tell you about the time you were 6 and tried to build a treehouse by yourself. Michael crossed the room and sat down, and for the first time in years, he let himself be a son again. Sarah quietly stood and moved to the chair across from them, giving them space, but staying close. You hammered your thumb so hard it turned purple, Edward continued, touching one of the photos. But you did not cry. You just looked at me and said, Dad, I think I need some help. That was the smartest thing you ever said. The afternoon light shifted across the office as father and son talked, really talked, for hours. Sarah listened, occasionally adding a memory or asking Edward to elaborate on a story. She had built this bridge between them, plank by plank, photo by photo, patient as the changing seasons. Michael learned that his father had kept a scrapbook of every article written about his company, that Edward told the nurses at his doctor's office about his son's achievements, carrying business cards in his wallet to hand out, that the old man's greatest pain was not his failing body, but the distance he felt from the boy he had raised. I thought you were ashamed of me, Edward said quietly as the sun began to set. Thought maybe I was not good enough for the life you built? Michael shook his head, tears flowing freely now. I was ashamed of myself, Dad. Ashamed that I let work become more important than the man who taught me the value of it. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice gentle but firm. It's not too late. It's never too late to show up for the people we love. That evening, Michael drove his father home himself, something he had not done in months. They made plans for dinner the next week, and the week after that. Michael started leaving work at 5, spending evenings listening to Edward's stories, filling in the gaps of all those lost years. Sarah's quiet intervention had saved more than a relationship. It had reminded Michael what truly mattered, what his empire was really built on, the foundation his father had laid with calloused hands and an open heart. Sometimes the greatest acts of love happen in silence. In the patient work of rebuilding what time and pride have worn away, Sarah had seen what Michael could not, that healing requires presence, that forgiveness begins with simply showing up. In the months that followed, Edward's health stabilized. The doctors said it was remarkable, but Michael knew better. His father had found his reason to keep fighting, and Michael had found his way home. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about life, love, and second chances. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to make things right. And leave a comment telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Your stories inspire ours.